Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome to the Rant, a Chicago Bears webcast and podcast. I am John Strong.
You are?
Okay. And that's Evan. That's Evan Altman. It's exclamation. And we're sitting here. We're going to talk about something that has to do with football. Not a lot going on with the Bears, but there was a big game yesterday.
Yeah, on which I took a big ass bath because I was convinced the Chiefs were going to win. And it actually wasn't that big a bath, all things considered. It's not like I had hundreds of dollars wagered on it. But I took advantage of, like, when you sign up for some of the new site, and they were given just stupid odds. And then I'm like, freaking Bucks, come on. They're finally going to. And sure enough, holy shit, the Bucks, freaking 43-year-old ass Tom Brady just beating everyone. Like, I was shocked at how one-sided that game was almost from the outset. And
it was not a good game at all. Like,
no,
it
wasn't
fun to watch because it was football, but it was just not. Yeah, it's my barbecue was much funner than watching the football game.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like,
it's hard to describe.
Yeah, it was just what I was hoping for. Certainly, I wanted the Chiefs to win anyway, but I was thinking it was going to be a little bit more of a shootout. We're going to see these teams moving the ball up and down the field, and Mahomes got very little protection. He was just under fire the entire game.
He was literally running for his life.
Yeah, and it was wild. Like, I saw somewhere where they had this kind of illustration that showed how the respective quarterbacks moved in the pocket and followed their paths, right, out of the shotgun. And they were like, okay, the white is where they completed a pass, the red is where it was incomplete. And Mahomes is like this squiggly, all this, and Tom Brady is like, just like with, the movement chart was like this big because he's very immobile, but they set everything up well. The Bucks clearly had that game planned. For as much as we've crapped on Matt Nagy for not being a very good disciple of Andy Reid, it sure looked like Bruce Arians just out-schemed the crap out of Andy Reid and the Chiefs. And it was bigger than that. And, the players certainly have to go out there and execute. But, boy, that was not what I expected. And, it was just kind of lame. The commercials were kind of lame. I don't know, man. It just felt weird. But,
listen, if anything from the game yesterday showed, it's how important an offensive line is. The two starting tackles for Kansas City were out, and it showed. You can have the best quarterback in the world. It doesn't matter unless it's Deshaun Watson, and which we're not going to get into that. But at the end of the day, you got to have an offensive line. The Bears' offensive line was in really bad shape. They lost a whole bunch of games because of it. And granted, their quarterbacks aren't great, but you've got to have an offensive line.
Well, and look what happened when they finally freaking took Rashad Coward out of there and switched things up.
It was a huge difference.
Consistent play. It doesn't have to be great as long as it's consistent. And if you got to give some of these guys the time. And if you don't give them time, and that's the thing is I think on a few or to scheme for, again, find ways to create more time. Once they started rolling Trubisky out and getting him to where his strengths were and minimizing the number of reads he had to make. It's a few things that come together. And it's, as a coach, it's knowing where your strengths lie, or not even necessarily the strengths, just what are the talents of the players on the roster you have? Because we see so often that these guys, you hear that they have a system. Well, that's great. But you need to change the system to fit the personnel you have. You can't just say, well, this is my system and this is what we're going to run. I don't care. And that's the whole, they went out and got Nick Foles because he understands the system Nagy likes to run. Okay, but he's not a good quarterback. And Nagy's play calling sucks. So I don't care if you know the system. If you're not calling it the right way, like, make your system fit your players, not the other way around. And I just felt like we saw a lot more. It looked to me as though the Chiefs got into that, and typical Mike Tyson or the Mike Tyson quote about everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And it looked like they came into it thinking just like I did, that they're going to waltz right in there and they're the more athletic team and they got all this talent. And Tampa came out and punched him in the face and kept punching him in the face until Miami just rolled over and tapped out. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah. Well, it definitely wasn't pretty. And if there was ever a question that Tom Brady is the GOAT, greatest of all time, at the quarterback position, I think that has been answered. Unless you're just a spiteful person who just doesn't like Tom Brady, and there are plenty of those people out there, I get it. There's no question. So we can stop talking about that. I think he put the exclamation mark on it. I was a little annoyed that he got the MVP. I really felt that should have been given to the defense as a whole, because Tampa's defense really played unbelievably. They won the game for him. They stopped Kansas City from scoring a touchdown. It's just, great defensive performance. I wish that Brady would have said something about that when he accepted the MVP trophy, because it was really all their defense. I mean, and he hit Gronk a couple times, and that was just always fun to see. But that was about the best part of the Super Bowl, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, and it's what I continue to marvel at is, and you talk about the systems, right? And for the longest time, everybody said, Brady's just a system guy. He's a product of Bill Belichick and the genius coaching and having this great defense in New England and having smarter coaching. And what happened now? I know there's several factors, but 43-year-old ass Tom Brady leaves, goes to a team that didn't make the postseason last year, and leads them to a Super Bowl. Meanwhile, the Patriots, behind Cam Newton, who's another fairly highly touted quarterback, sucked out loud and didn't make the postseason. Like, that was and I will say, like, I did not think Brady didn't look real good last year for New England. I didn't think he was going to be able to do this. I absolutely doubted. I didn't want the Bears to try to go get him. I said, if it's my team, I don't want this guy on there. He's old. He's way over the hill. And he absolutely proved me an idiot in that regard. I mean, he came in there and they put the weapons around him. And again, that's the thing, is they set up the system around him, got him players with whom he was comfortable. Bruce Arians is not so married to his thing that he said, Tom, you're going to have to do what I want. It's okay. How do we make this thing work together? And I mean, to his credit, Brady's taking care of himself well. He's not the most athletic dude in the world. He's not going to run anywhere for anything, but damn it, if he's not a great quarterback who knows exactly. And I mean, when you've been around for 20 years in the league, there's nothing a defense can throw at you that you've not seen. Right. And so, what he did, he's been in the Super Bowl half of his career, literally half of the years he's played in the league. He's been in the Super Bowl. And so there's no moment that's big for him. Like, that's what he's used to every year. Oh, I play the Super Bowl. This is, what is that? That was his 10th time in the Super Bowl, right? So okay,
7th win.
That's just,
unbelievable.
And that's what it comes down to, is like, they knew what was up. Like, and when you have that dude who, like, okay, we got, it's like the Bulls with Jordan. When you've got that guy, all right, you're all playing loose. You know what I mean? Because
it's a factor that you have to, like, it's something where, like, if there are questions going into a game, there's always, like, kind of, you don't know how someone's going to perform, or if you have confidence in that quarterback spot, and you can just kind of put it off to the side and be like, all right, we don't even have to worry about that.
Yep.
And that's really what Tom Brady does for the team. And I love how Jim Nantz tried to prod him into talking about his future. And he just kind of brushed him off like, oh, of course I'm going to be back. And it wasn't even like a thing. It's like, I'm like, of course, why would he not come back? Of course he's coming back. That's not even a question.
Other than the year that he got his ACL blown out, like in that first game or there at the end of the preseason or whatever, when Matt Castle took over and still took him to the playoffs. And then speaking of the connection to the Chiefs, and Castle got that big deal there, which is, again, that's part of why people thought Brady was just a system guy. You just throw anybody else in there. But I mean, he takes good care of himself. He really hasn't been hurt. You're not talking about a Ben Roethlisberger who's got like 18 different injuries every year. Like, Brady stays clean, man. He's not getting beat up. I think he had some concussion issues a few years back. And that was something he spoke about, and I think his wife has wanted him to avoid, obviously. But I mean, and that's a part of it now is these guys are playing into their old age from a sports perspective because quarterbacks are being protected so much more, and nobody's better protected right now than Tom Brady. Like, the league does not want him being touched, so they're going to milk this thing for all it's worth. But I will be interested to see if he's able, because we see with a lot of these guys, they can look good for a while, and there is a point at which something happens and you can't recover from it. We saw it with Peyton Manning. He fell off hard that last year with the Broncos, right? Injuries finally caught up with him, and he was barely able to eke out. I mean, he just limped to the finish line and barely made it through. Can Brady continue? Can he close it out at 44 years old and keep going? Can he go to 45? Can he go? I don't know. But it's just incredible that you get a guy like that who, either one of them, this guy goes to a new team, immediately impacts him, takes him to the Super Bowl, and here we are cheering on the Bears, who can't for the life of them find any sort of consistency at the position ever. It's just incredible.
It is sadly incredible. So you may have noticed me laughing. I don't know if you've seen these pictures, but the guy, the streaker guy, I'm going to throw this on up. Let's take a look. Let's look at that. He has a pink thong on, and he is running. And so, when this was happening as the streaker, I get annoyed that they don't show it on TV because I want to see it. And the actual radio call from I'm not sure what the guy's name is, the play-by-play guy, but he was calling it, and I heard that radio.
Kevin Harlan, I believe.
Yeah, it was Kevin Harlan, and it was amazing. And I commented while it was happening and we weren't seeing it. If you're going to go out there and you're going to run across the field in the Super Bowl, I mean, drop trowel, just do it naked, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do it, do it. And little did I know what was transpiring. Look at this guy. This is amazing. I mean, he is in a pink, like, leotard type thing. And he was dropping pants, throwing the peace sign up to Patrick Mahomes.
But here's the thing to me incredible. Now they say, we don't show them because we don't want to encourage copycats. But I'm like, if you show that dude getting his ass beat when he gets tackled to the ground and arrested like that, and this is a felony, right? Show it. First of all, it's entertainment value, and then people will see him get his ass kicked and be like, I don't want to do that. Like there was a streaker or somebody. It wasn't even a streaker. I think the guy had his full clothing on. He was at Ohio State when Luke Fickell was, I believe, their linebackers coach at the time. And there's an image of him basically doing the rock bottom to this guy, like caught him across the neck and shoulders and just crushed him to the ground. And Fickell's like 2 times. Like, this dude here looks like he's got a little junk in the trunk. He's a little thick. So, I mean, he can probably put up a little bit. But some of these dudes, like you see somebody getting tased, there's one of those, like, show that shit, man. Because I don't want to get tased. Like, I would never do this. I've got too much self-respect, but show the whole thing. Show the dude getting arrested. Let's see it.
I'm sad that they don't show it, but they're trying to discourage people from doing it because people don't, it's like if you're on TV, blah, 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 this and the other thing, whatever, show them. Anyways, I digress.
If you're dumb enough to do that, not showing it is not going to dissuade you from it.
I know. That's my point. It's like,
like if that's ever a thought that's in, you're like, yeah, man, I'd love to streak across the Super Bowl. Whether they show that or not is not going to change your mind.
Dude is going to do it.
Yeah. Show it.
Anyway, so we're getting back to the whole quarterback situation. So, it's like the only news, if you search Bears Twitter and you look at kind of Bears websites and look at ours, we haven't covered it as much because honestly, there's nothing to cover. People are talking about Deshaun Watson, which is, listen, everybody wants Deshaun Watson. I get it. Yeah. As the Bears, I want Deshaun Watson. Trade the whole damn team. Okay. It's not happening. So now the latest news is just Carson Wentz. And listen, for me, I'm like, the only way you trade for a quarterback is if you literally have absolutely no quarterback, which Foles isn't great, but he is a quarterback. or you're getting a franchise guy. None of these guys who are available. Carson Wentz is not a franchise quarterback. He never was a
He's not
franchise
even the
quarterback.
starter in Philly anymore.
Exactly. It
got
shouldn't even be a
benched.
conversation.
Yeah,
But
and
this is what happens. This is what Bears fans are doing. It's, and I saw people on Twitter last night. This is another thing. I am ranting here. Is I saw on Twitter last night a couple people posted the Bears beat the Buccaneers. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Woo!
We did not win the Super Bowl. Just because we beat the Buccaneers doesn't make the Bears good enough to make the Super Bowl. None of that matters. That comment on Twitter, those comments on Twitter, people pointing out that the Bears beat the Buccaneers is what I like to call Bearsy. It's something that you do when your team isn't successful. Stop doing that, people. Stop talking about Carson Wentz.
The fact that the Bears beat him is part of why I didn't bet on the Buccaneers at all. I'm like, if this team's shitty enough to get beat by the Bears, there's no way they can win the Super Bowl. But they did. I mean, but that was what was so funny is the Bears beat them, and then the very next week they turned around and absolutely just thumped the Packers, and then beat the Packers again in the playoffs in Green Bay. Like it was so weird. But what I would it's what's funny though. So I live here in Indianapolis, and there's a lot of Colts fans that apparently want to trade for Wentz too, which is really weird to me. I'm like, this dude got benched in Philly, and then the initial. Although speaking of a quarter, part of the thing was that they were saying Foles would go back. It was going to be like Foles and Tariq Cohen and a first for Wentz and like a fifth or something like that, which is less to me. That's better than 2 firsts and a player.
Yeah.
But it's still like, is Carson Wentz, like, is he going to be able to get back to, even if he gets back to his early days, and he was bad this year, but the dude fumbles a lot. I think it's like
better than Mitch
Trubisky in the last 2 seasons.
That's my question. Is he better than Mitch Trubisky?
And not even that. And I think he is. But is he a first round pick and Tariq Cohen better than Mitchell Trubisky? Like that's because you are giving up a lot. And the Bears, for a team that is up against the cap, right? The reason Wentz is being moved is because they signed him to a big ass extension. So he's not cheap. It's the same reason Jared Goff got moved out of LA, because he got this big ass extension. They didn't want to keep paying him because he wasn't putting up the numbers they wanted. And so if that team is looking to get rid of him, and you're a team in the Bears that's already projected to be 10 to 15 million over the cap, now you don't have a first round draft pick unless it's for next year or whatever. Now you're losing one of your offensive weapons in Cohen, even though he didn't play this year. And who else are you adding around this guy? So it's not even a question of is he better. And again, that's even up for debate. But is he enough better to elevate your team when you are actually going to have to lose some of the talent that's around him, and you don't have the draft capital to make? If they were going to swing a trade again, people have mentioned David Carr. If he is available, I'd rather have David Carr than Carson Wentz. Personally,
I agree. But I still don't want to give up anything for him,
right? And that's because who are you? And the same thing like you said with Watson. Like if it takes so much to get this guy, and we saw what happened in Houston when they lost all their skill players, they had no receivers for him to throw to and a shitty line. I don't care how good he is. If there's no talent around him, it doesn't matter. And so if you trade all this, you don't have much talent as it is, as evidenced by their production. And now you go trade half the team for this dude. Who's he going to throw to? Who's going to block for him? So what does it matter? And that's again, and then the next stage of that is, do you trust Ryan Pace, who again, we got him and Nagy as lame duck type coach and GM. Do you trust Pace to evaluate and sign talent and draft talent? And do you trust Nagy to coach that talent around this new quarterback that you have? I don't. I don't at all. And so it's like, wait, you're going to have them swing this trade, bring this dude in, then maybe they're both gone if it doesn't work, and you're stuck with this guy at a high price, and you've got fewer draft picks. There's so much about it that I don't like, but I don't like the situation they're in. So maybe that's me being Bearsy, because I'm like, I don't like what they got. I just don't have a solution to it, and I don't know what that is. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
I think the right path, although many people may not like it, is Yeah, obviously you've got Foles. I wouldn't mind him re-signing Trubisky. That wouldn't bother me at all. I think Trubisky's better than Foles. I think you got to go out and draft an offensive lineman or two. You got to develop the offensive line. The guys that are starting on the offensive line, a couple of those guys should be backups, and just kind of develop that offensive line. I mean, it's not necessarily a restart, so to speak, because they still have some very good players. They still have David Montgomery. They still have Darnell Mooney. They've got Cole Kmet. If you keep those guys in place and you build that offensive line, and then you address that quarterback position in the next 2 to 3 years, and I know people aren't going to like that timeline, but to me, that's the only real kind of solid way out of this. You don't make a trade for a quarterback unless that quarterback's going to put you over the hump. At least that's what I think. And as you mentioned and pointed out, is if the Bears make a trade for a quarterback, they're giving up the pieces that they need to really be building around. And the only way to do that is in the trenches. Build up the trenches, get that going, keep the defense kind of pumping. There's nothing wrong there. And just kind of look to see what happens in free agency over the next 2 to 3 years. Maybe there comes a point, if you can get through, who knows who they draft next this coming off season. But if they have a decent draft and they get some more talent around the guys that they already have, you've got more pieces you can possibly trade to get a better quarterback. But trading for Carson Wentz to me is not at all anything we should even be talking about.
No. And I don't know what his cap number is. And again, I know there are obviously ways to restructure a lot of that stuff, and we see that happen all the time. But and what's really kind of interesting is a few weeks ago we were talking about the draft. I was like, I would really like to see them go get Mac Jones out of Alabama if he was available. But now, like, the latest projections have that dude going, like, initially he wasn't even anywhere near the first round, and now he's moved up into the top half of the first round. But give me a dude who is accurate, right? Who can make those throws, and whether it's Trubisky or re-sign somebody to keep, because I don't want that rookie being thrown into a situation where, especially a guy from Alabama who's used to having 500-pound linemen just clear 20 seconds of time for him to stand in the pocket. But give him time to build that team around him, to make sure the talent is there that he can succeed. Because again, I don't know what Wentz's number is, but given where the Bears are relative to the cap, if you add a really expensive quarterback, that is going to hamper your ability to add those pieces around, not only from the draft, but who else do you need to go out and get? And if it doesn't work, now not only did you make this move and you lost the draft capital, but you're also, again, that's why Philly is moving the guy. That's why LA moved Goff, because it was a contract they no longer wanted. And again, if you are that limited at that point, unless there's a restructure that's involved, and maybe there would be, right? Because maybe he's like, what the hell? I need to get out of here. I got benched. I hate Philly. I'll redo it. But the dude got benched. Like, that's the other thing. Oh, this is our franchise quarterback. He wasn't even the franchise quarterback of the team he was on that didn't make the playoffs. Like, he got benched for a rookie, right? Or a second year, whatever. Yeah, because it's Jalen Hurts. So, speaking of a guy who used to be at Alabama, who himself was benched for Tua Tagovailoa, and then was really good at Oklahoma. Like, that's the part. It's not as if this dude just went through and had the best season of his career and is pissed because, they fired the head coach and he doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Or whatever. That's not what happened. He got benched because he wasn't good. And they said, the rookie's better than you, so we're going to play him. And so now you're going to give up picks for this dude? You're going to give up talented players for this dude and pay him a crap ton of money? Man, I don't like it. I do not like it one bit, Sam. I am. Yeah. I do not like green eggs and ham or Carson.
So hopefully that doesn't happen, but the Bears are kind of stuck in neutral here. Obviously now the Super Bowl's over, so things can kind of start warming up a little bit just on the transaction front. And, you expect to see that start to happen. But as long as this kind of quarterback uncertainty is out there, I think if you see Wentz get traded to somebody besides the Bears, who knows what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. I highly doubt he gets moved at all. I think once that stuff, there's a little bit more clarity around that. Hopefully we can start focusing on the Bears' 20th pick, and we can focus on kind of what the options are there. But it's like, I've started looking at some draft projections and things like that, but it's just kind of like pointless to talk about because you don't really know what's going to end up happening. That may not be the Bears pick. We don't know. I'm hoping they don't try to trade up. I'm hoping they don't do anything. I just don't feel like there's a franchise quarterback in this draft. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's one of those drafts where, a franchise quarterback, if there is one in this draft, it could be a 3rd round guy. You just don't know.
Or if there is, and he's up at the top, and we've already seen. So here's the other thing that cracks me up, right? So it would be funny if for no other, it would feel like the most Bears move, right? To not only have they kept their coach and GM, which I was against, but so on their roster currently are their top quarterback is a former number 2 draft pick that they gave up a bunch of picks to go and reach and get, despite him not actually being that good. And another quarterback who is a former Eagles quarterback, for whom they traded. Carson Wentz, current Philly quarterback, also a number 2 draft pick. So it would just be the perfect full circle for them to go trade for another number 2 former draft pick from the Eagles. And that would just be taking Trubisky and Foles and making them more expensive and then adding that back in there. But I mean, think about if that were to happen. Think about the money and the draft picks that would have gone into, and then let's go ahead and add Mike Glennon in there with how much money they paid him. How much do you sink into that position time and time again? Like, how many bad mistakes have to happen before you're like, you know what? No. But then, do you trust him to draft a guy? But it's just so much money and so many picks that are included in the last few quarterbacks that the Bears have had. It's embarrassing. And if it were to happen again, and again, maybe it works. Maybe Wentz is reinvigorated and then all of a sudden he's awesome. I don't believe that would happen. Maybe it does. But the chances of that to me are far slimmer than the chances that he comes in and is mediocre and the Bears yet again have because then what happens? And that's, I guess maybe it's just me being too conservative, a person in general. I'm not speaking politically, but just I'm not a big risk taker. And to me, the chance that it pays off is much lower and the payoff is much lower than what happens if it doesn't pay off. Because if it doesn't, you are screwed.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the troubling part, right? That's really where you kind of run into issues with the whole, just contemplating it in general is, yeah. I mean, if you want an example of how it can turn out and will most likely turn out, just look at what happened with Nick Foles. I mean, you don't need to go back that far.
Look at what happened with Wentz himself. That's what could go wrong is you're paying this dude a shit ton of money and you got to bench him for the rookie because he sucks. And you traded all this and you're paying him all this money and you traded to get him and now you can't even play him anymore. And that's just not, I mean, the Eagles are a couple years removed from the Super Bowl, which Foles actually ended up winning for them after Wentz went down, interestingly enough, but their coach is already fired. They benched their quarterback. One guy got traded. One got a huge contract, is about to get traded, and the coach has been fired. So, I don't think that's what you need to go out and try to replicate other than maybe firing the coach. That I would like the Bears to replicate that part of it. But I don't think you need to go, hey, look what's happened to them and how bad they fucked this up since they won. Let's go replicate that here in Chicago. God, what a team that is to emulate.
Yes, all so sad and so true. But let's talk. So I'm pulling up right now quarterback ratings. So Nick Foles' quarterback rating is 87.1 career. Mitch Trubisky 87.2. Carson Wentz 89.2. That's not an improvement at all. Deshaun
Watson,
whole
points. That's two whole points of improvement, baby. Come on, that might get you an extra. Literally 3 points in the season. Who knows? Maybe that's an extra win here and there.
Now you look at quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson, who has a career 104.5 rating, or Patrick Mahomes has a career 108.7 rating. those are guys that are franchise quarterbacks. Now, there's a huge difference. There's, it's just, to me, it's just very obvious. So my hope again is that, and I know, I think the Bears are a 500 team. I mean, if they don't make any moves, I think if they develop the offensive line, this is not something that's going to get fixed in next year. The Bears are not going to win the Super Bowl next year. They're not going to win the Super Bowl in 2022. I'd be really super surprised if they're even in a position to compete for the Super Bowl. So I think there needs to be more realistic expectations set around the team. And then you kind of go forward with those expectations. It'd be nice if ownership just came out and said, hey, this is kind of where we are and this is kind of what we're doing. Here's a real clear, basic plan. Unfortunately, as obvious as those types of things seem sometimes, I mean, if you look back at how Theo did with the Cubs, what he did when he initially came in, it was kind of like that, where he communicated very clearly about what needed to happen. Then he went forward and he executed it. With the Bears, it just feels like nothing's really ever been communicated very clearly. Everybody's just kind of making all these guesses, and there's just and they play that way, and so it's
well, and here's the, again, let's, aside from my, I don't want to call it disgust necessarily, because I think we're well past that with the way the Bears operate. We kind of understand how they do things, and it's unfortunate that they do exactly what I think they're going to do every time. But unless there's something we don't know about, and you've got, you didn't extend anyone in terms of leadership, not that I think they should have, but if you're going to keep them around and you say, hey, we trust these guys to evaluate, which is really dumb, because trusting Ryan Pace to evaluate quarterbacks is a really stupid thing, because again, we've discussed why that's a bad idea. But if you're doing that, you're saying we anticipate that they'll be able to find the next franchise quarterback, however that comes out. But you don't have a guarantee that either he or Nagy will be there beyond next year. That, to me, there's some disparity in the thought there. There's some a little bit of a schism, if you will, because you don't even know the people who are evaluating this. And again, whether it's Wentz or whomever, if you think that's going to be your franchise guy, but you're not even guaranteeing the coach or GM will be around to coach him and to put talent around him beyond that year, again, it's the same thing as bringing in a new GM and not letting him hire a coach. You're going to go get a quarterback and then maybe have to bring somebody in to work with him later. I don't like it at all, but I'm with you on this. And the NFL is a sport in which you can turn your fortunes around very, very quickly, much more so than most other sports, just because of the salary cap and the parity that's in the league across the board. So, it's not like one of these things where they got a tank for 4 or 5 years. They could have another down year or two. And if they do the right thing with acquiring those draft picks and getting that talent, because that's what you need to have with the salary cap being what it is, especially when it's going to be depressed this coming season, you have to have those young players. You have to have a lot of young, talented players. And we've mentioned a few of them who are coming up, so that you can offset any of those bigger salaries that you may go out and pay to free agents. The Bears just don't have enough of that. They've got some really outstanding skill position players, but when it comes to the line on both sides, right, you either got to pay those guys a ton of money. We saw that with David Bakhtiari. We see that with all the elite offensive linemen, or you've got to go find them in the draft. And you can pick those guys up in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round if you load up on them and hit on a couple of those.
Yeah.
And that's, I'd rather see them do that. I'm with you. As much as I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that Trubisky is the answer, he is an answer at a much lower cost than what these acquisitions are elsewhere. If you got to kind of parlay that into another, because who else give him a deal? He's not going to cost a ton of money. Build up all the talent around there and see what happens and where you can find somebody if you have to draft them or whatever, and you pick it to do. I mean, whatever.
Yeah. And that's where I think we're both totally in the same kind of position here, and the same opinion is if you build up a team in every position and in every way except for a quarterback. And I think people get really super sidetracked with the quarterback conversation sometimes, because they're so focused on the quarterback. But if you have a team that has a solid offensive line, that has a solid defense, that has solid position players, and their quarterback sucks ass, then you can fix it.
Right.
You can go and fix that. That's easy. I mean, it's not easy to get a franchise quarterback, but I mean, that's where Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. You know, I mean, that's where you get guys who aren't great. That's where Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl with the Broncos. Peyton Manning was not a good quarterback.
You create the margin for error. And instead of trying to eliminate it, a move like this to me would eliminate all the Bears' margin for error.
Exactly.
Without making them markedly better. And that's really what it comes down to.
And you don't want to do that. You don't want to appease your fan base so much that you go and make these moves that make absolutely no sense, that mortgage your future, that don't give you an opportunity to really build a good team. It's team sport. And then plug in a quarterback into that team. And that's what Tampa Bay did too. I mean, yes, obviously Tom Brady was a big part of that, but they had a good team. They had a good offensive line. They had a good defense. All they needed to do was plug a quarterback in. So you get to a position like that. And that's the goal to me for the Bears is do that, focus on that, worry about the quarterback, not this year, maybe next year, probably more in 2020, 2023, I guess, and go from there. We'll see. Who knows? It's probably not going to happen that way, but
of course.
So anyways, I think that's about all we really need to talk about today. We'll see what happens. If something big breaks, we might have a show, but we'll probably go on at least every 2 weeks for now. That's what our plan will be. And then we'll play it by ear from there. So
cool. See you
guys in a couple weeks.